Sentite bene? Sì, ecco, adesso è meglio. Per l'ultimo intervento del primo giorno della Social Media Week vorrei invitare Daniela Benelli. Daniela è assessore del Comune di Milano con responsabilità sui servizi civici, che introdurrà l'ospite questa sera. Daniela.
Grazie. Grazie, sono molto contenta che mi abbiate invitato a farmi l'onore di introdurre Ryan Davis. Vi voglio dire subito che Ryan Davis è il cofondatore e il digital director del The For 2012, che è la campagna che ha portato alla vittoria delle elezioni americane del 2012 sul tema del marriage equality, cioè dei parità di diritti del matrimonio per ogni genere di coppia, anche ovviamente dello stesso sesso. Questo marriage equality è anche same-sex marriage o gay marriage o equal marriage, che sono un po' sinonimi per dire che viene riconosciuto, come sapete, negli Stati Uniti il matrimonio omosessuale. Credo che Ryan Davis oggi ci introdurrà la strategia e le tattiche che hanno guidato questa campagna, che è stata molto importante perché, come forse molti di voi sapranno, ha spostato proprio l'ago della bilancia nelle urne grazie a una campagna condotta tutta sui social media. Io diciamo, sono lieta di essere io a presentarvi Ryan Davis o a introdurvelo perché in realtà, come sapete, il Comune di Milano non è il primo, già altri comuni l'hanno fatto, ma è uno dei comuni in Italia che forse con maggior successo ha provato a istituire un registro delle unioni civili, che ha una validità ovviamente solo amministrativa, ma che ha avuto una partenza sprint. In pochissimo tempo siamo arrivati già a 500 e oltre coppie che si sono iscritte al registro delle unioni civili, e la ragione per cui si sono iscritte non è tanto per i vantaggi materiali che questa registrazione porta, ma ha proprio il senso di mandare un grande messaggio al Parlamento perché anche l'Italia adegui finalmente la sua legislazione sia in materia di unioni di fatto, cioè di unioni civili, sia in materia di unioni omosessuali. L'Italia, come sapete, è un paese dove c'è ancora una forte resistenza, non soltanto per la presenza del Vaticano, ma certamente anche per questo, all'accoglimento di questo marriage equality, come potremmo tradurre diritti del matrimonio per coppie anche dello stesso sesso, ed è il paese più arretrato in Europa, cioè quello che ancora resiste all'introduzione di una legislazione moderna in questa materia. È evidente che fino a quando non avremo un mutamento legislativo sarà difficile riconoscere vera parità di diritti a queste unioni civili, omo o eterosessuali. Fra l'altro c'è anche un po' la leggenda che il tema riguardi soltanto le coppie omosessuali. In realtà il registro che abbiamo istituito a Milano dimostra che delle 500 e oltre coppie che si sono iscritte, solo un terzo sono coppie omosessuali, quindi il tema è sentito anche per un'evoluzione naturale del costume che porta molte coppie etero e omosessuali a non fare la scelta del matrimonio, ma naturalmente il tema che si pone è anche quello del riconoscimento del matrimonio. Quindi abbiamo tutto da imparare da chi è riuscito a condurre, in un paese dove comunque la cultura sociale resisteva a questa trasformazione, è riuscito a condurre una campagna che è risultata vincente. E pensiamo che una campagna di questo genere debba potersi tenere anche nel nostro paese, e speriamo che il Parlamento, che il prossimo Parlamento finalmente faccia suo questo obiettivo e sfidando anche in alcuni casi una opinione pubblica in parte refrattaria a recepire la trasformazione, riesca finalmente a darci una legislazione moderna. Queste erano le sole cose che vi volevo dire. Sono contenta che il Comune di Milano perlomeno possa, diciamo, vantare questo piccolo primato, piccolo ma importante per il segno politico che il Comune ha voluto dare, ma che anche tutte le coppie che hanno avuto accesso a questo registro hanno voluto dare forte e chiaro al nostro Parlamento. Quindi chiedo a Ryan Davis di raccontarci come ha fatto questo piccolo miracolo, ringraziandolo per la sua presenza, e also welcoming in Milan. Come.
Thank you so much. Pleasure. Hi. Hello, Milan. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. I don't speak any Italian, so I'm going to assume that was all very lovely, so thank you for that. Thank you for the organizers of this event. I've gone to a lot of social media weeks, and this is one of the best organized events that I've been to, so thank you guys for putting this together. It's fantastic. You know, I can tell you I've spoken at a lot of venues that are less beautiful than this about social media, so this is a real privilege, so thank you guys so much. I'm going to talk to you today about how we use digital to impact the marriage equality races in 2012 and how we hope to use digital to continue to win those races moving forward. My name is Ryan Davis. I work at a company called Blue State Digital. If you want to tweet along with us, we are at SMW Milan. That's the hashtag. I'm going to talk through some stuff today, who we are as a company, and then I'll move into Stonewall, which is the beginning of the gay rights movement in America. I'll talk a little bit about how marriage equality happens in America. Then I'll talk about the four and the digital strategy there, and a couple things that didn't work, which is always, you sometimes learn more about what doesn't work than what does. What I see is the opportunity Italy has and the rest of Europe, and a couple more thoughts, and then we can take some questions. So I think it's going to be a pretty full evening. First off, the company I work for, Blue State Digital, we're located in New York, DC. I have an office in London and Boston and Los Angeles. And we're best known for helping elect this guy. Thank you. Yes, please. President Obama. Now, believe, understandably, this is one of those rare instances where candidate and technology and moment all come together to create something magical. But Barack Obama had incredible foresight and understanding that social media was the next step in community organizing, and he took digital very, very seriously in 2008, while his competitors in the Democratic primary and ultimately in the general election did not choose to invest as much in digital. So he was able to outraise, fundraising is a significant part of American politics, and the president was able to raise an incredible amount of money online, both in 2008 and 2012, and also get people to take real-world actions, which is so important, knocking on doors, making phone calls, ultimately voting. So we played a part in those victories, and we're very proud of it. But we have our roots from politics. As actually my first campaign was the Dean campaign in 2004. Howard Dean was the Democratic governor of Vermont, and he was a radical at the time. He opposed the war in Iraq. He wanted universal health care for everybody, and he believed in something called civil unions, that made him a total radical on gay rights. There was no one else in the race who was a serious candidate who believed in any sort of gay civil union. And he had signed civil unions into law in Vermont. And if you look down here, you'll see me. There's the governor. And this guy over here is Joe Rosefars, who went on to be the chief of digital strategy for Obama 2012, and he also owns the company I work for. So since then, we've definitely moved on and worked on the Obama campaign and have gone on to do more corporate and large nonprofit work, but our heart still is with these causes. And our mission, and I think the mission of any good digital agency, is to drive measurable results by inspiring and engaging people across whatever platforms we're talking about and whatever sort of campaigns we're discussing. So a little bit about me. I run the social media department at Blue State Digital. I've been there about 3 years and worked with between 50 and 75 clients. Again, I was a member of the 2004 Howard Dean campaign, and I was co-founder and digital director of what we'll talk about tonight, which is the 2012. And I've done a lot of work in local politics in New York City and New York State. And this is a picture of me at 20 in Iowa, right before the famous Howard Dean scream that ended his candidacy, which was not my fault. Been around politics for a while. So Stonewall happened in the summer of 1969. There was a bar in Christopher Street called Stonewall, and it's still there. And there was, it was illegal to have a gay bar in those days in America, in New York City specifically, and so the police would occasionally raid these bars and arrest people. And then one night, when they raided the bars, the people at the bar decided to fight back and to stand up. And they had something called the Stonewall Riots, which lasted for a night or two. And this was an event that really started the gay rights movement and galvanized gay people in America to think of themselves as politically powerful. And we were very humbled when President Obama mentioned Stonewall in his inauguration address just a couple months ago, which is a big turning point. But Stonewall led to the creation of Gay Pride in June. This is a picture of the very first Gay Pride Day in 1970. And, you know, it seemed like for a moment that gay rights was going to hit this fast track and stuff was going to start happening in the 70s. But lo and behold, just as we were starting to gain some sort of political legitimacy, AIDS happened. And the entire crux of gay politics shifted from winning equal rights and employment discrimination and all these things that we're talking about now, just to saving people's lives and trying to get access to drugs. So, you know, in another world, you can imagine major gay rights events happening much sooner had we not had to deal with AIDS for the 15, 20 years of that crisis. But now here we are. We have Catholics marching for marriage equality in Minnesota. You know, how far we've come since 1970. So, in America, marriage equality is at this point left up to the states. We have 50 states, and they all have different laws for gay people. So it's very complicated. If you're gay and you get married in New York, and then you go to Rhode Island, do you have the same rights? Typically, you would. Under any other law, if I get a driver's license in New York, I can drive in California. But because Bill Clinton signed into law something called the Defense of Marriage Act, we do not have that right. Marriage is one of the only things that doesn't transfer state to state. Gay marriage is one of the only things that doesn't transfer state to state. Straight marriage, just fine. So we're left with 50 states, and we're having to fight 50 different campaigns to win these states. So we can do that 3 different ways. We can win through the legislative branch, like we did in New York, where we got the New York State legislators to vote and pass marriage equality, and we got the governor to sign it. That happened in New York State. It also happened in Maryland, but then Maryland they took it to a referendum, so that's something we call a popular vote. Now, there's something really off-putting to me about putting human rights on the ballot at all. There's something inherently sort of undemocratic about being able to decide what your neighbors can and cannot do that in the privacy of their own homes. But this is one of the ways that we win marriage equality, and we were lucky enough to win it in Maryland, Maine, and Washington in November, 3 of the 4 states that we're going to talk about today. And the third way we can win it is through judicial decision. And this is like what happened in Iowa, where someone sues, and it goes up to the state Supreme Court, and the state Supreme Court says marriage equality is legal. And that's what happened in Iowa. And that's what might happen in the future if we're going to get all 50 states. The U.S. Supreme Court could give us that opportunity. But those are the 3 ways that you're going to get marriage equality in the states. We're going to talk today about the popular vote, because that was how we did it in 2012 with the 4 states. So we had a big challenge in 2012. And that challenge was that we had lost 32 statewide ballot initiatives in a row. The most famous, I think, being California Prop 8, which was in 2008. So there was this very weird moment where we were all so excited to have gotten rid of George Bush, and that was a really good thing. And but we had also lost this massive gay marriage battle in California, and they had not passed gay marriage. So we had lost that. More recently, in 2012, we lost North Carolina. We got whipped by like 15, 20 points. So we had a bad track record at winning elections. So that was one of the challenges we faced. Another challenge we faced is the reality that in the vast majority of American states, there is an actual constitutional amendment prohibiting gay marriage, which raises the bar on how hard this is to get done. All those states that you can see, the states that you probably wouldn't visit if you were going to America, those colors are the states that have on their books now laws against gay marriage. Some of them constitutional amendments, some of them just laws. We have George Bush, Karl Rove, and Ken Mehlman, three American political characters to thank for this. In 2004, they thought it would be a really good idea to use gay people as political tools and go around the country advocating for constitutional amendments against gay marriage just to get out the right-wingers to come vote. So gay people in 2004 were used as a wedge issue to win Bush votes, and it most definitely worked. And the vast majority of these states passed those constitutional amendments in 04, 06, and 08. So this was a strategy that paid off great for the Republicans, Karl Rove and Ken Mehlman. Ken Mehlman's a really interesting guy because he actually came out as gay after he left after he left the Bush administration, yet he had done all this damage already. So thank you, Ken. There was another big opportunity, and that's in the incredible change, Americans change and how they view gay marriage. And I think, you know, this chart speaks for itself, but if you see just how radical the change was from 2004 to 2012, complete reversal from a majority being solidly against gay marriage to a majority being solidly for gay marriage, all happening in the span of just a couple years. There's a lot of reasons this happened. One of them is that millennials, people under 30, tend to be very, very pro-marriage equality. Another is the president's endorsement of gay marriage, along with the NAACP, which is America's foremost black civil rights organization. Both endorsed marriage equality, and that changed the direction of the African-American vote on the subject. So a lot of reasons that happened, but there's no denying that it's incredibly fast momentum for marriage equality nationally in America. And, you know, I've talked a bit to some Italian activists here about how different the South and the North of Italy is, and how, you know, some cities are more conservative and some are more liberal than others. Well, it's obviously the same in the United States. This is a really interesting chart because if you just look at the red here, these are millennials. These are key votes. In Alabama, 35% of millennials support marriage equality. That's not a lot, okay? If you go to Massachusetts, the most liberal state in the union, 75% of millennials support marriage equality. So it's basically like a different country. Now these guys, the 65 plus, they're not our friends anywhere, really. 10% in Alabama, that seems to me to be a little more than probable. I've been to Alabama, I couldn't find that 10%. But even in Massachusetts, only 35%. So this is a massively, I mean, the generational divide is so clearly evident. So you can imagine what will happen as these little red boxes start to take over. We're going to start picking up all this low-hanging fruit here and winning these states. Quite a few coming very, very soon. And of course, the president's endorsement of marriage equality came after we lost North Carolina, but before we had the votes in the 4 states we're going to talk about tonight. So this was a really, really important thing. It was the first president to endorse marriage equality. He is one of the most important African American, and so that sort of leadership changed the direction of those polling really significantly. And he's just a really respected guy around the world. So this was a really big deal and absolutely helped us pick up some of these states that we're going to talk about. Also, we were looking good in the state-by-state polling. This is an example of a graphic we made for the 4. We made a handful of these. Every couple of weeks we do a new graphic about the polling. And if you see here, I'll explain sort of the situation we were facing. So in Maine, we had a vote in favor of passing marriage equality. So if people voted for it, that meant marriage equality would happen. In Maryland, we had the same thing. You could vote for marriage equality. If enough people voted for 4, marriage equality would happen. Now, in Minnesota, we were not fighting for marriage equality. We were battling the last of the constitutional amendments. So we were battling an anti-gay initiative. So the correct vote in Minnesota was no. This is where this gets complicated. So it's for, no, yes, right? I mean, this is a wonder in the American political system's the envy of the world. And then in Washington, we had a yes vote for marriage. So we were battling to win 3 states for marriage equality and to stop 1 from having the constitutional amendment. And this sort of messaging, like, we need your vote, we can win, it's close, was really, really important because people tend to stay home if they see a poll leading by 10%. And in every single election in the last 5 years where we've had to battle one of these ballot initiatives, the polling has been better, has been better for gay people than the actual results. So we always worried there was a little bit of bias in these polls. If somebody calls you and says, do you support marriage equality? You might say yes just because you don't want to sound like a jerk, but when you go into the voting booth, you might vote no because nobody knows how you vote because it's a private ballot. So that's something that when we talk about it racially, it's called the Bradley effect after this guy who ran in California who looked like he was going to win and then lost. But there really isn't a good word for it. But it's something I think that does exist. So what we did was there were the 4 states, Minnesota, Maine, Washington, Maryland, and there were all these different organizations in each of those states that believed in marriage equality, that were fighting for marriage equality. And so what they did was they followed the New York model and they formed coalitions in each state. And what we did was Blue State teamed up with All Out. All Out's a terrific organization that has a very global view of gay rights. We teamed up to support the work that these 4 coalitions were doing. And that's when we get to the 4/2012. So why did we do the 4/2012? We thought the content being produced by all the mainstream gay organizations was too general. It was not pointed at young people. It lacked much of an edge. It was all just very nice and very clean and very tidy. But there was no edge, no spark. And you know, we understood that on social media, you needed to make some noise. You needed to do things that were interesting. You needed to poke a little bit. So since we were not part of a large gay organization, we could get away with sort of coming up with our own messaging and what we felt worked. There wasn't any organization that was specifically focused on these 4 elections. So there was no website you could go to where you could find out what was happening in these 4 states and how you could get involved. So we saw an opening there, a space there that we could step in. And we thought the other orgs, online, creative, and social, was lacking. They were focused on the ground stuff. They were focused on email and fundraising, but they weren't focused on creating and curating the best content they could find, and that's where we saw an opportunity for us. So that's why we created the 4/2012. And we built it entirely on social media. The website itself was built on the Tumblr platform. Tumblr was an amazing partner for us. They spotlighted a ton of our content. Tumblr sits with 40 to 50 million users who are all in the right age bracket that we're looking for. And then we syndicated out our content on Facebook and Twitter and had a very limited email campaign because email wasn't really the driving force of the young people we're trying to reach. So our strategy was to produce or curate 1 piece of quality content a day. And I showed this piece here first because this was one of our most popular graphics. And the reason I think it was so popular is because it had real utility. It actually showed people how they needed to vote and when they needed to vote. And this was shared thousands of times and picked up and put all over the net. But it has all the qualities of a really good infographic, right? It's not overly branded because studies show that if you brand your graphics too much, people are less likely to share them. It's the right size. It's square, so it's 403 by 403, which is one of the sizes that Facebook tends to feature in the news feed. And it had very light branding, and so people could figure out if the graphic got lifted, they could still kind of find out who we were. But this was a piece that we ran with, and it continued to be shared over and over again, even months after we had initially shared it on Facebook. Another tactic we tried was to create urgency and momentum. I work for a lot of brands and a lot of nonprofits, and it's sometimes hard to create a narrative because there isn't a clear beginning, middle, and an end. But what's great about a campaign is that there is a real narrative. There is really a beginning, middle, and an end. The end is ultimately winning or losing the election, but you at least have something that you're going for. And we found that people really responded to these reminders that the election was coming up. And so we calendared these in and did them quite often. Some of my colleagues thought a little too often, but I looked at the data and it was working, so we kept going. But these were hugely popular and helped create that feeling of urgency, that countdown. We started 100 days before the election, so we had 100 days is a lot of content to fill. So these came in handy when we were trying to remind people that we were actually getting close to the end of this thing. We also experimented with smart, targeted paid media, specifically on Facebook. And we didn't have a lot of money, so we would, when I say, we would throw $20 to $50 at images that would work. So we'd put something up, and we would let it sit there for 10 minutes. And if it got some interactions, just a few, we'd be like, okay, that's probably a dud. But if it had popularity, if it was getting interactions, if it was getting shares, we said to ourselves, all right, this is something we can throw some ad money behind and probably get even more virality, even get that out there more. So that's what we did. We used each post as an instant focus group, see if it worked, and then we targeted based on age, location, and interest. So this is this guy, you might not know him. He's a big American star named Jay-Z. You guys know Jay-Z, right? Come on. That was a joke. So Jay-Z endorsed marriage equality because he's a really cool guy. And if you're watching Jay-Z, we can hang out anytime. He endorsed marriage equality. And so what we did with this was we advertised specifically to people in the 4 states who are under 30, but who like Jay-Z. had liked Jay-Z on Facebook. So we're hitting a group of people who are probably not getting a lot of marriage equality stuff in their news feed. So this was a big success. 400,000 people saw it originally, and that's not counting all the other spaces we were putting it up on. One of our strategies was to activate young voters. This was a couple reasons, because millennials strongly support marriage equality, so getting them out to vote was really, really important. Young people generally vote at lower rates, so they need more incentive, they need more reminders that this is important for them to do. We knew the races would be close. They could come down to a percentage point or two, and youth vote could really be the thing that moved it. And young people were more highly active on social media. And another reason that I don't have up on here is that in 2008, the president took a phenomenal amount of the vote of the under 30s. He just dominated with young people. And the worry was that because of various policies and perceptions that the president hadn't been liberal enough, that young people would be less likely to come out and support him this time around. So we were worried about that. So one of the reasons why we started this thing. That turned out really not to be true. The president luckily we ran against Mitt Romney, who young people for whatever reason did not flock to. But it was a big part of the campaign to make sure these young people knew there was other elections on the ballot. We were also aided in Washington State because they had put marijuana legalization on the ballot, and that got out the young vote as well, so that was helpful. And this is an example of some content that we made, obviously targeting young people. And we focused it specifically, again, if you liked Pink, if you liked Gaga, we advertised you directly, so we were getting people that we knew were going to be somewhat interested in the topics we were pushing. In all these images, whenever I hear people complain about how expensive it is to run a digital campaign, it's absolutely true. If you hire a first-rate, world-class agency, you're going to get a great campaign. It's not going to be cheap. But if you're an activist group and you can find a 20-year-old who really understands Photoshop, like these images cost us like $35 each. There's a kid who's like 21 named Jet House who's fantastic, and who would be at our beck and call and make these in a matter of hours when we wanted him to get them up. So it was pretty fantastic, and he did a great job, and we got a lot of interactions on these posts. Clean, simple graphics were like really, really, really effective. So something like this is so simple to make. I'm voting for marriage equality, but a tremendous amount of people shared this because it looks really fun in the news feed. People like to express what they believe in on social media. The study after study shows that people want to positively identify with causes they believe in, and by giving people opportunities like this to do it, it's really simple. But it reminds them, it reminds their friends and family that there's an election coming up and they got to get involved. And we knew that when people shared things, it was totally important to always have our URL in the description. So we were always driving people back to the website where they could get more information, where they could donate, where they could find other content to share. And notice it's square, all images, good and square. So this was something that I thought was really interesting. This was an image that was actually sent into us from one of our followers. And I thought it was a little wordy, and the quote was taken from 2007. So it was like a really old quote. And so it wasn't really news. And so we debated whether or not it was relevant enough to use this time around, and we discovered that it was more than relevant enough. People flipped out over it. Huffington Post ran this exact quote as like the lead story in HuffPost Gay, which makes no sense because it was like 3 years ago he said it. But people really like Bruce Springsteen. And so we were able to resurface this old quote and use it, and it was like new again. And we were able to do that fun targeting people in those 4 states who like Bruce Springsteen, going after those middle-class white voters who might not necessarily support gay rights but love the boss. So really, really effective stuff. And again, we were just kind of willing to try things. So we had 100 days, so we had to have a lot of content. As I mentioned before, the graphics as real utility worked best. This was the graphic we put up the day before the election. And it's just very, very clear. Tomorrow you get out and vote. And at this point in the campaign, we had something like 11,000 fans on Facebook. But we were constantly getting thousands and thousands of shares on everything. So we were getting impressions of 1.5 million, 2 million on all these graphics off of a very limited fan base, just because the virality was so high. It was really crazy. And it's difficult to duplicate unless you have a really, really passionate base of people who care about an issue. And that's what we had here. And so we were really lucky to have that. Another thing we discovered, that even though you have to be 18 to vote, if you pull your paid ads down to like 16, those kids are way more likely to share than like a 20-year-old. 20-year-old's a little cynical, right? 16-year-olds have friends and family and teachers and older friends on Facebook. Even if they can't vote, pushing out that message was really effective and definitely drove our numbers up without having to spend too much money. So this is something that was really important to me. You know, I try to avoid clicktivism. You know, I don't like to give people a feeling that, hey, I can click on like, I can click share, I can comment, and now I've done something for gay rights and I can go home. Because the reality is that if we're going to win any elections, we're going to have to do real world actions, right? I mean, you have to vote in the real world. You can't do it over Facebook yet. So we teamed up with a lot of organizations that had on the ground muscle and were planning on the ground things. And then we tried to get our fans and followers to participate in those things. So this is a great example of that. This is something called Drive for Marriage. It was put together from a collection of organizations, and they wanted you to spend a weekend in one of the 4 states supporting equality, and they would put you up, and they would feed you, and you would go around knocking on doors and then, you know, hit the bar at night, if there's any bars in Maine. There must be. So this was an example of us trying to give people a real-life action they could take. And we did this with phone calls, knocking on doors, registering to vote. I know you guys don't have to register to vote here, but in America, for whatever reason, just being an American who's 18 does not give you the right to vote. You have to go to the post office and fill out a form. So we made sure that people did that prior to the deadline, because it would be sad to not be able to vote when you wanted to vote for equality. So I think that it's a hallmark of any good campaign. You know, the Obama campaign is a great example of this, that they focused on how do we get people from behind their laptops, behind their smartphones, to actually get up and knock on doors, make phone calls, because that's how real change happens. And I think that, you know, there's definitely movement towards that. But we all have to kind of sort of lead by example. We all can't just rely on other people to do the work for us. So next time you see somebody locally asking you for some volunteer help for a campaign you believe in, and it's on social media, do it, just so we can start having more and more people do it, because we really need to get those actions happening in the real world. We did a lot of influencer and media outreach. So for any piece of content we put out that was sort of fun or sexy or different, we would blast a list of the most prominent gay bloggers in the country, progressive bloggers, and media and bloggers in the 4 states. So we were able to get a lot of earned media that sort of expanded our reach. This was really, really useful in things like the Google video that got a lot of coverage. We produced a 4-part documentary series with New Left Media, where we sent them to each state, and those were hugely successful online. All the blogs covered them. So this was really, really a helpful and easy thing to do. I mean, it took us about 3 hours to pull all the email addresses, and after we had that, we had a terrific press list, and people wanted to write about this issue. Bloggers are desperate for content, so giving them that was a way to do it. Something that was really, really important for us, because we had 100 days to fill, was to open up a Google Calendar and just start filling out ideas for each day and making sure that we acknowledge calendar events. And what I mean by that is we had a pretty cheesy Halloween graphic that said, you know, boo, inequality is scary. You know, but we really tried to make sure that we were going to be on point with what the internet was talking about that day. You know, the internet likes to talk about certain things, and holidays always fall in there. So we made sure we were hitting those calendar milestones. And we were also nimble enough, though, to respond to something quickly if it happened. So calendaring is very, very important. You know, you never want to wake up in the morning and not know what your organization is going to post on Facebook. You always want to have something ready to go. And then if breaking news happens, absolutely respond to it. But you know, make sure you have something that is there just in case. So here's some of the things that we learned that didn't work. Video didn't work if it wasn't breaking news or a documentary. So early in the campaign, we would go to fundraisers for marriage equality, and we would track down influential supporters. This guy, I don't really know who that is. This is John Waters, who's a Maryland filmmaker. He's one of the great, quirky American filmmakers. And this is Martin O'Malley, the terrific governor of Maryland. And we had them record endorsements for the For 2012, but nobody cared. And the reason nobody cared was everybody knew what Martin O'Malley thought about gay marriage. He'd signed the bill a year and a half ago. John Waters is gay. Everybody knew he supported gay marriage. So what we discovered was, because videos have such a high barrier to watch nowadays, like you have so much going on, like a graphic you can just see, but a video you have to spend time with, people were way less likely to watch a video that gave them no new information or didn't give them anything exciting. So even though Martin O'Malley is somewhat famous and John Waters is a gay celebrity, nobody cared what they had to say about marriage equality because there was no news there. So we stopped doing that pretty early on, and we focused more on graphics and more on original documentary content, which really worked out well for us. You can't just rely on user-generated content or just curating. So what we had hoped originally, somewhat naively, was that we would start this thing, and then 6 days later we would start to get all this amazing content from all over the country, people like desperate to send us really cool things. And like we got things, a couple things that we ended up using, but most of the stuff we got looked a little like this. And I hope the person who did this is not in the audience. It was very nice of you to do it. But it's just not the quality that we're looking for here, you know? And this represented the bulk of the stuff that I got in my email box for those 99 days. And I would write back, thank you, and they were like, what day are you going to use this? And I'd be like, we're pretty full right now. But you can use it. So you just can't rely on that. You know, you have to have a good creative shop, have some creative thinkers who can come up with stuff, especially if you're really going to push a daily campaign like we were attempting to do. Calendar always, but be nimble. This is one of those great examples where we had something planned that day, but then this guy who's a football player came out, a straight football player, came out in support of marriage equality in this really angry letter he wrote to this politician who was against marriage equality. And it was sort of this no-nonsense argument that the internet went wild over. So we scrapped the piece of content we had for that day, and we went up with this. And it was totally in the moment. It was totally the right thing to do. And people really, really just responded to this graphic. And it opened us up to a different sort of audience too, right? Because at some point, you know, Lady Gaga and Pink and Jay-Z, you know, these are all entertainers. But to have somebody who represents the most masculine sport in the country, American football, no offense to your guys' football, you know, this was a big deal. And his support, I mean, he's been a very vocal supporter of marriage equality since he came out as a supporter. So this reached a whole, you know, a lot of just straight guys who hadn't given a lot of thought to marriage equality, but now they've got somebody like this who's given them a way in. So it's not, you know, it doesn't make you gay to support marriage equality at all. It makes you somebody who supports human rights. So, you know, using people you wouldn't think of, definitely a smart idea. Have clear decision-making workflows, and this is my pet peeve, and my colleagues would attest. This is my favorite PowerPoint slide of all time. This was George W. Bush's Afghanistan PowerPoint flowchart, and this very clearly shows how we're going to win in Afghanistan, people. If you can't follow that, you're just not paying attention. This resembled the workflow that I was trying to avoid when we did the For 2012. It's incredibly important to make sure you know who can make, especially when you're dealing with digital, and this goes for all organizations, campaigns, and brands, because you have to respond quickly, because you have to be in the moment, because it involves your PR team and your marketing team and your advertising team and you know, who knows what other team. It's really important to have a clearly designed workflow so we know who can say yes to putting up a graphic. And one of the problems that some of the bigger, more established gay organizations have is that like 15 people have to look at a Facebook post before it goes up. So 15 people have to do it, and one of those persons is like an executive who's like always flying around the world. You're not going to be able to, you know, get timely content out. So we wanted to avoid that. So we did pretty well. You know, I mean, there were some heated conversations, but you get 4 gays in a room, they're going to fight over something. So that's what happened. But making sure you know at the end of the day who can say yes and who can say no is really, really important when you're doing good digital, so you're not waiting and waiting and waiting for approvals. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I see your opportunity being here in Italy and in Europe. So I think there's a massive movement for marriage equality that's sweeping across the whole world right now, the whole developed world right now. And Europe is the next place. I mean, obviously Sweden and you know, the Netherlands have already done it, but those guys are, you know, way out there. So they're doing all sorts of things. But the French and the British moves, I think, are really, really important to show that Europe, that these major countries in Europe are making a move towards marriage equality. You know, without much of a fight, Holland is just gonna pass it, and Cameron's gonna pass it. And what I think is really, really exciting about this is you've got David Cameron, who's a conservative, right? And you've got Holland, who's a socialist, who probably agree on nothing, right? They agree on nothing, except that gay people have a right to live like everybody else, you know? And I think that once that message gets out, that this is not a political debate that we're having anymore. You know, the politics of this should be over at this point. This is a human rights discussion, right? And the fact that David Cameron can see that, and Holland can see that, and I think, you know, even Dick Cheney supports gay marriage, you know? And Dick Cheney and Holland agree on nothing, you know, even less than Cameron and Holland. So I think that as we see this happening, as we see more and more conservatives embrace this, we can depoliticize an issue that shouldn't be political to begin with. This is the most recent polling I could find on Italian support for gay marriage. Same-sex marriage is trickling up year after year. It is moving in the right direction. There's no reason to think that's going to change as long as the generations keep going the way they're going. But really, really strong support for some type of civil union, 63%. You know, in America, we had a lot of states who had civil unions prior to marriage equality. It was like a stepping stone, a gateway drug, if you will. So, you know, it's not a bad strategy to start local, regional, and work your way up and start building those bases. Because once people see, you know, Howard Dean signed civil unions into law in 2003 in Vermont. It was one of the first states to do it. And a year after that, he gave a speech and he said, you know, the sky hasn't fallen. And, you know, that was news to some people. So I think that, you know, once people see how normal and dull gay marriage, it is regular and normal as any other marriage. Once people see that, they're more inclined to say, okay, why not just give it up and give them the whole thing? So sometimes this incremental stuff, while it doesn't satisfy the left as much as you know, winning that big marriage victory, that incrementally, step by step, gets you to where you're going. You know, sometimes it's small steps and sometimes it's big steps, but you know, as long as you're moving forward, I think that's the way to go. I think it's really, really, really I think it's really, really important not to let the religious right own the morality debate. There's nothing immoral about two people wanting to live together and share their life together, to raise children together, to be a normal family. And I think that it's a mistake to cede all that to the religious right. And I know that you know, France is a very Catholic country. America is a very weird religious country. But the reality is that more and more religious people are supporting marriage equality. The majority of American Catholics support marriage equality. We're seeing this happen, and so don't see that whole argument. You know, Jesus didn't spend a lot of time talking about gay people. That's the reality. You know, so he spent more time talking about poverty. I'm pretty sure. So I don't let the religious right control the debate. They controlled it in America for far too long, and until we finally said enough is enough. And we're going to start having more religious people speaking out about this issue, because this is a moral issue as much as anything is. So some closing thoughts, and then to have some time, I'd love to show one of the documentary videos that we shot in Maine. Gay marriage is not the only thing happening in the in the LGBT fight. There are a lot of issues that really matter, and you know, we sit in a very privileged place to even be having this discussion. You know, I couldn't go to Uganda and give this speech right now. My life would be in danger. So, you know, say what you will about the politicians that disagree with you, but, you know, we live in an era, and we're lucky enough to both live in countries where this debate is happening, where we're allowed to practice our sexuality. We might not be able to get the piece of paper we want yet, but we know that's coming. But remember that in 76 countries, it's illegal to be gay. It could be long prison sentences. In some countries, it's death. You know, Iran regularly executes teenage boys for crimes against for sodomy crimes. You know, so we are in a really good place to be even having this discussion. And I think it's incredibly important as people who are lucky enough to have this discussion to remember that, you know, our brothers and sisters in these 76 countries are not so lucky. I mean, they can't even, 3 of them can't even get in a room without risking an arrest. So remember that. We're also on the right side of history over the long term. I know it might feel that way, but I mean, this is from the Gallup World Poll 2009. This question here, as you may know, is discussion around the rights of gay men and women. In general, should gay people have equal rights in terms of job opportunities? Pretty general question, right? But like in 1978, like people were not so sure if gay people should be able to get any job that they want. But by 2008, it's almost everybody who agrees that gay people should at least be able to get a job somewhere, right? You know, that is, and look, the people who don't think that have become the entire fringe. This is amazing movement in just a matter of decades. Over here, this is a little sloppier. It's not as pretty a chart as some should be. But do you think that being gay should be legal or not? 64% people on the globe say that gay marriage should be legal. That's the high. That's the highest we've ever had it. And almost the lowest amount of people think it should be legal. So we're moving in the right direction. Again, it's not going to be clean and simple and easy, but we are moving in the right direction. It's one of my favorite Martin Luther King quotes, not just because it's Barack Obama's favorite quote, but the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And I absolutely believe that. And I think we absolutely are seeing that with marriage equality. And if you just give me 1 minute, I'll pull up one of these videos from Maine so you can watch what I think was our most successful video content. And then after that, I'll take some questions. Thank you. Be thinking of those questions. Just give me a second. Sorry. Gotcha. Oh, you're connected. Is it on YouTube? Yeah. So I'm going to show you a video from friends at New Left Media. And if you want to visit their website, it's newleftmedia.com, and they do really, really phenomenal work. And I'm going to show you the very first video because I think it was my favorite. Is there sound? Yep.
I've always loved Maine, and growing up in New Hampshire, Maine was always like vacation paradise, just beautiful, and people are exceptionally friendly. My name is Meredith Johnson. I am from New Hampshire. My partner's name is Annie McPeters, and she is a Mainer. So we've been together for 10 years. I'm 30, Annie's 31, so it's a third of our lifetimes, which at this age I feel like is a long time.
Look a black smudge on your face.
Is it noticeable?
Do you want me to lick my finger and wipe it off?
No.
Because I will.
Annie is hilarious. I can always count on her. She's incredibly loyal, and I'm lucky to have found her.
Meredith, she's very, very kind and very patient. She has just a huge heart. I want to get married because I love Meredith and we're life partners. We do all the things that married people do. It just is something that I would like to have recognized.
We decided to go through, and even though it was not legal, we were having a commitment ceremony. It was so much fun.
We had 180 people, and it was just a beautiful day. And
it was very
It was
typical.
like a lot of the other weddings we go to, except there were 2 brides.
Instead of getting a marriage license, we had sort of a certificate of support. We're hopeful that we'll replace it with...
Not replace it, they'll be
add
side by
to
side.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marriage license.
An actual marriage license. This is it. I mean, I want to spend the rest of my life with Annie, and I want people to know that. I want them to know that this is the relationship.
My name is Mick Ramos, 23 years old, and I will definitely be voting yes on one. We're trying to talk to as many people as we can, regardless of whether you live out in the middle of nowhere or you live in the middle of an urban area. We're trying to openly discuss why marriage matters so much. I can't even imagine what it would be like for me to wake up and not have the ability to marry the person I loved, to marry my girlfriend. It's something that I take very seriously and am looking very much forward to. It's really, really good to go up to the door and have a great conversation with somebody, you know, on their doorstep, and just be able to see the stories that you tell them stick. Take an hour out of your day. We have volunteer phone banks and opportunities all over the state. If you vote for one thing, vote yes on one.
I'm Steve, and this is my partner of 37 years, Jim. We're still speaking to each other.
Actually, it's getting easier.
It is. We are always interrupting each other. We finish each other's sentences.
Just
So
like every other married
I guess we're just like everybody else who's been together that long. We lived in the woods for 27 years, and now we're in a community, and that feels really great.
What to say about Steve? Well, he's a lot more imaginative and creative than I am, but I can put the practical side to what he has for ideas.
If you are on a desert island, Jim is the kind of person you would want to be with. If anything went wrong, he'd take care of it. You know, in some ways, we're just starting over again. We moved to a new house, and we feel like a young married couple again in many ways. We have the same concerns that all of our straight friends who are couples have. We're worried about retirement. We don't have pensions, and so we are continuing to work like so many other people in America right now. We're worried about health care. I want to make sure I have access to Jim, and he feels the same way about me if something happens. And we feel very confident going into the future that Maine will give us the right to marry,
And that's what we've been waiting for.
and that could be as soon as November.
So the good news is that marriage equality passed in Maine, Maryland, and Washington. So those people we saw can all get married. Thank you. I'm happy to take any questions on specifically the marriage equality campaigns or any of the other work I do at Blue State Digital.
Can I have the first question, Ryan?
Yes.
So the time seems to be the right one. The tools seem to be very accessible. In your campaign, you didn't have particularly high economic resources. So my question is, how important was the passion? You know, you're a very passionate speaker. How important was the passion in achieving this result? Because if you see, a lot of companies do a lot of activities online. They have huge resources, a huge staff, but they don't make a dent with these campaigns and these activities. How important do you consider your passion, the passion of your team was for this?
I think it's incredibly important. You know, the way that social media works is friends share with friends who share with friends, and then it exponentially grows, right? And we were the 4 of us, and there ended up being like around 7 of us who were involved in sort of the day-to-day. Would harass. I mean, if you were a friend on Facebook and we had a piece of content we were really proud of, we were going to get a message from us. I don't care if I hadn't talked to you in 3 years. You know, I mean, we were really, really aggressive about saying, "Hey guys, we need your help. This is the moment. We got to win these 4." And it was really easy to tell the content that we had pushed out, or like literally pushed out person by person by person, because it was the content that had the highest virality. It was the content that people responded to. And, you know, I don't think it was just my passion and my colleagues' passion. Like, there was a lot of excitement around these races, and there was a lot of desire amongst the LGBT community to show that we could win these, because we have these big Supreme Court cases coming up this year, and we wanted to show that the public was behind us, and we had never been able to do that before. So, and people were galvanized by the loss in North Carolina. So I do think the passion played a role in it, but not just my passion, but the passion of all of our supporters and the thousands and thousands and thousands of people who shared and took action.
Thanks.
First of all, I'm sorry for my English, as always.
I'm sorry for my Italian.
Yeah, no problem. What was the reaction between the LGBT communities? Because in Italy, the LGBT community is very, very fragmented. We tend to fight to each other, and we hate everyone. So it's always difficult to start a campaign and
right.
Gain followers. So which was the reaction to your campaign, and how do you?
That's a really, really good question, and a really important question. When we won marriage equality in New York State, we did it for the first time ever by taking all the gay groups in New York State, and believe me, there were a lot of them, and making them stick together and work together. And that was done primarily through the leadership of my friend Brian Elner, who happened to be one of the four. He was one of us working on this campaign, and he developed a strategy to unite all the LGBT groups. And through his sort of force of personality, he was able to get everybody in the same room on board, working together with Governor Cuomo, who not everybody liked at the time, and was able to pass marriage equality. So that sort of coalition work system that he built has then been successfully pulled into all the other states. So we were at a point where we were working with there were big national players like Freedom to Marry, HRC, and then there were all the state players who had money and were being given money by the national players. I would be lying to you if I said that when we started this, some of the major gay organizations were not upset at us about diverting resources. We spent no money, you know, compared to like one of their executive salaries, but they were upset about us diverting resources. But over time, they saw us more as, because we were not trying to raise money for ourselves. We were just trying to push out their content and get people to take their actions. So over time, they sort of warmed up to us, but it wasn't initially the best working relationship. And you know, and my message to the Italian gay groups would be: look, you know, you can. There's a lot of time that you can fight about things, little things you disagree with, but remember who the real problem is here, and that's that you want to pass marriage equality, and you know, if you don't like the guy next to you, you know, deal with it for 6 months while you're working the campaign together, and then fight over martinis later on, you know. Question, I think, up front.
Hello. My question is, I really don't get how Blue State Digital was involved as an agency and how was involved as a think tank. Because I'm trying to think about something similar here. For example, in Italy, I don't really find any kind of agency that is involved in some civic stuff like this.
Right.
So my question basically is, can you better explain us what was the real role on all these for Blue State of Digital?
Sure. So the primary work was done by 3 organizations: Blue State Digital, an agency called Purpose, which is a great agency that developed their branding, and then All Out, which is a nonprofit, the international nonprofit. One of the 4 people that I was working with is this guy named Andre, who is the executive director of All Out. And we needed a home for the four, and because of American election law, we couldn't just create an entity that lobbied. We had to, there was a lot of legal paperwork, so we became like a campaign of All Out, so we lived sort of under them, and we just sort of generated actions, and we collected some email addresses for them, but mostly it was sort of just, they were doing it as a favor, because they don't really focus on the states. Blue State was, I run social media at Blue State, but this was a side project entirely for me. I hired Blue State, like anyone would hire Blue State, to produce the website and to produce the functionality and some of the share tools. So that's how they were involved, and then Purpose did the branding. But nobody worked. None of the agencies we hired did this pro bono. They were paid as if we were any other client, because we have other clients who do similar things. So that would have been wouldn't have been appropriate. So we just raised the money independently and then hired the agencies that we wanted to work with. And because I have a soft spot in my heart for Blue State, they were the obvious place to go. Another question? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Buonasera, my name is Oksana. I would like to ask you, what are the main strategies to make social media campaigns successful? Because these rules are valid not only for special topic, but for any other campaigns.
All right, that's a broad question. I'll try to give you an answer that makes sense. When we're thinking about when I'm thinking about good social media campaigns, the first thing I'm thinking about is creating content that's going to be interacted with, and by interacted I mean liked, shared, commented on, and hopefully driving people to a website where they can donate, volunteer, buy your shoes or whatever it is that you're trying to get people to do. The second would be an engagement strategy. So it's called social media for a reason, right? So a good social media campaign has to be responsive. So if people are tweeting at you, or they're writing you on Facebook, or they're posting on your Tumblr, making sure you respond to each of those people's almost as a customer service rep. I mean, that's what we've all become in the age of social media. That's really, really, really an important aspect. And then focusing on conversion. As of now, social media is not the best platform for action taking. So when I'm working with a client who's looking to raise money or looking to get volunteers, we're trying to figure out fun ways to collect email addresses. So we'll have contests where people have to give their email address to win. One of the more famous examples of the Obama campaign doing this was something called Dinner with Barack. And if you gave your email address, you could be drawn out of a hat and win dinner with Barack Obama. Clearly, Barack Obama is a really good asset that not everyone has access to. A dinner with Hollande might not be as exciting a proposition. But thinking about how to convert people from social media users, which is followers, which I think are the lowest on the ladder of engagement, to people who actually are going to take more actions for you. That's got to be a key part of your strategy. And in terms of the kind of content I see working, visual content works really well, but balancing it out with enough videos that are short and like this one you saw tonight, which sort of just is a very clean, simple argument for marriage equality, showing very normal people. That stuff is really, really effective too. But far and away, visuals are what's flying right now on social. And that might be different in a year or two, but for now, that's what we see. Any other questions?
Ryan, thank you very much. I think your presentation was very important from two points of view. One is for achieving marriage equality in Italy, and the other one is for everyone that's working in communications online, because what you've shown could be applied to several different campaigns, be it for-profit or non-profit. And I think you shared some of the keys to making these things work and what clicks and what not. So thank you very much for coming for such a short time to Milan.
Thank you so much for having me.